Microdose, yeah. Microdose. Microdose. Microdose, dose. Microdose. Microdose, dose. Microdose. Microdose, dose.
And we're doing it 5, 4, 3. What's good, y'all? Kush Hayes here, coming to you with the newest edition of the Microdose. OMG, how do we keep doing this? I don't know. It's a labor of love, and I love that you enjoy our labor. I do another show called the Kick-Ass Movie Podcast. I plug it a bunch of times. And next week, we're going to have a movie. We're going to discuss No Retreat, No Surrender 2. And on that series before, I had the privilege of talking to a man. He's a producer. He's a director. He's a writer. He's from Switzerland by way of Toledo, Ohio. Keith Strandberg. How you doing, man? What's good?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, to have a kid from Toledo, Ohio, living in Switzerland, it's a little strange.
Tell me about that, man. Like, what made you decide to move to Switzerland? Like, you're a citizen of the world. Like, there's no place you haven't called home. But what about Switzerland made you hang your hat for the time being?
Well, I still am working in the watch industry. So in between the movies that I was making back in the 1980s and 1990s, I would buy a nice watch, or what I thought was a nice watch at the time, to sort of celebrate each movie wrapping. And then when I had to transition out of movies, I had become sort of an expert in watches. So it was a nice way to further my career was to move here to Switzerland, because an American journalist set in Switzerland, where all the watch companies are, was really a benefit to me. So I became the editor in chief of Revolution USA, even though I was based in Switzerland. But it was a great way to really cement my relationship with the watch industry.
And did it take long for you to transition to the life of Switzerland? Like,
a little bit. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, and the quality of life is fantastic. But it's the Swiss are not the warmest people. Let's say that.
Okay.
They're a little bit standoffish, especially to expats, because they see a lot of expats come and go. And I speak English and I speak Chinese, and French is really hard for me. So I speak a little French, but my French isn't so good. You'd think that French would be easier than Chinese, but for me, I think French is a lot harder.
That's fair. That's fair. So do they kind of just like, they frown on people that are not natives, in other words, right? And if you don't speak Swiss, French, Italian, or German, they frown a little harder?
Yeah, a little bit. I think they see us as, they see a lot of expats as they come for 6 months or a year and then they leave. So they don't want to bother getting to know you. But, I've sort of integrated into society. I started an American football team here, and we played in a league here in Switzerland. And so, that has helped. And I have a bunch of good friends, but most of my friends are either expats or people in the watch industry that are used to working with people from all over the world.
How accepted is American culture out there? Like Marvel movies and Star Wars and all that shit? Like,
oh, they're the biggest movies. American culture has made its way all around the world, so it's very accepted here.
Okay, so if you, as long as you're in front of the camera, they love you, is what I'm hearing.
That's right, exactly. Yeah.
Ohio's had a pretty good year, NFL, NBA wise. Like, is any of that registering out there to you? Like,
I follow the NFL.
So how'd you feel about the Bengals this
Cincinnati.
year?
Oh, it was great. I did my master's at Antioch University, which is down close to Cincinnati. And I have a very good friend who lives in Cincinnati. So I enjoyed the Bengals run, and I think Joe Burrow's great. So it was nice to see them get in. I thought the Rams were going to win, but I was hoping the Bengals would win.
Okay. What about Cleveland Cavaliers? Any thoughts when they were having their little streak there for those 5 years?
With LeBron, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, it was fun to watch, because I did my undergraduate at Oberlin, which is just outside of Cleveland. So I tend to watch the Cleveland teams as well. I was born and raised in Toledo, Ohio, which is on the other side of the state, but went to school, started at USC, and then transferred to Oberlin and finished my undergraduate at Oberlin. I got my master's in Antioch, near Cincy.
When I spoke to you last on the Kick-Ass Movie podcast, I asked, like, you know, what was the drive? What pushed you into filmmaking? You're like, I just want to make the worst movie imaginable. Um, and while you were out in China, you managed to call up every studio, and all of them but one hung up on you. And that one that didn't hang up on you is because they actually got to hear that this guy actually speaks the language. Let's bump him up the ladder a little bit. Did you run into any of those other folks that hung up on you? Like, you probably didn't even catch the names at the time, but like, did that conversation ever come up? Like, oh yeah, I called Fujifilm one day and they flat out hung up on me.
Yeah, I was calling Golden Harvest. I ended up meeting some of the people that worked for Golden Harvest and worked for Run Run Shaw and those guys, but I never met I don't, as you said, I don't remember who the people were that hung up on me. I just remember NG being the one that answered the call and was willing to talk to me. So, and that's a relationship I still have to this day. So that was back in 1981. So, I'm still really good friends with NG and spoke to him 3 days ago. So it's been one of the biggest relationships in my life. The longest relationship is with NG and seasonal film.
When Mr. NG gives you that ball finally, like, how difficult is it to make that bad movie? And in your mind, was it the bad movie you thought it would be? Did you actually go like, actually, we got something here. This is pretty good. This is an entertaining picture.
The reason why I thought I could do what I could do is that the movies that were already made were pretty bad. So I figured I could make a movie easily as bad as those, and maybe I could have a chance to make something better.
Okay.
And I think that when we made No Retreat, No Surrender, we didn't know what we had. In fact, the guy that was selling No Retreat, No Surrender didn't really believe in the movie, but it really resonated with people. And I recently did, I think it was 5 years ago, that Kino Lorber brought out the Blu-ray, and I did the commentary on the Blu-ray. And
fun.
It was hard for me to watch because it isn't a great movie, but it had something. It had the innocence, I think, of Kurt's character training with the ghost of Bruce Lee, and it really had something special, which was to combine Hong Kong action with an American story. So I think that we got a little bit of lightning in the bottle with that, with No Retreat, No Surrender, and it really has made an impact on people. And that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in trying to do something else, to reboot No Retreat, No Surrender, to do a sort of a modern story that can help connect with people of this day and age. Because when you watch No Retreat, No Surrender, or any of the really seminal martial arts movies, like I recently watched Billy Jack, and I remember Billy Jack as being like this great movie that really made an impact on me. And then I watched it because they brought out an anniversary edition, and it's really a bad movie. I mean, it's really hard to watch. And
it doesn't age well.
But I remember it as being this groundbreaking movie, and there are some really nice moments. But you show that to, I teach at Webster University here in Switzerland, and if I were to show that to my students, they'd turn it off within the first couple of minutes because it's so poorly made. So I think that there's a way to take sort of the spirit of No Retreat, No Surrender and turn into a modern piece that people will watch, and then maybe we'll get more people to come into the martial arts, because the martial arts was so instrumental in my development as a person that I'd love to see more people get into it. And I think today with MMA and a lot of the martial arts movies that are out there, they're super violent. There's no honor, or there's no soul to it. And, I think it's important to get that message out to people, that martial arts isn't just about fighting and beating up people and knocking them out in the octagon, that there is honor, and there's the Bushido code, and there's a lot of benefit to people.
How long does it take to write the first No Retreat, No Surrender?
I think it took about 3 months, because we were kind of under a deadline. And I didn't know anything about writing a script then. I told NG that I did. He said, "Do you know how to write a script?" I said, "Sure, yeah, I know how to write." That's always been my career. Throughout my career, I've always felt that as a writer, I can write anything. I just need to know the format. And so it took me a while to learn the format. And actually, my first draft of the No Retreat, No Surrender script was, I think, 185 pages. And Typically a martial arts movie, the script is about 80 pages or 85 pages. So I wrote this
Right.
epic martial arts movie, and then I was on set every day to rewrite the next day's pages because they were too long and they were too convoluted. So it was a great learning experience for me, having written the original script and then working with the director every day and then every night to rewrite
Mhm.
the next day's pages.
So you had a final script, and then going into recording, you just rewriting stuff on the fly. How different was the movie from the original final script? Because again, these things go through multiple drafts already before you get to that final script. How different is it from that script to the end of the picture, end of recording?
But it was very, very different because the thing that I learned over the course of making No Retreat, No Surrender is that
Mhm.
every scene should start at the last possible moment and it should end at the first possible moment. And so I would write these really long introductions to a scene, and then we'd be sitting with the director and the producer, NG, at night at the dinner table, and they'd say, cut this, cut this. So it was mainly condensing it. Everything was there,
Mhm.
but it was condensing it into something that we could film and that would play, in the right amount of time. If you write a scene like today, especially, like if you're writing a scene where somebody's proposing to his girlfriend in a restaurant, okay,
Mm.
you could write it that they get out of the car, they walk into the restaurant, they wait to get their table, they go sit down at the table, they look at the menu, they read it, then they eat, and then he proposes. But in today's movie world, you wouldn't see any of that. You'd see them already sitting down at the table, and the scene that you wrote that was maybe 5 minutes long might play out in 30 seconds because people are so used to seeing, they see people in a restaurant, they know how they got there, and we go to restaurants. So
Mhm.
that was something I needed to learn, was that I needed everything to be super tight. And I was writing sort of long introductions. So we really condensed everything. The movie itself is very similar to what I wrote. It's just condensed from, about 200 pages down to about 85. So
Wow. Wow. Takes 3 months to write. How long does it take to film?
I think we shot it in 6 or 7 weeks. And
Okay.
those are 6-day weeks.
That's pretty conservative, especially for like today, isn't it? Like,
Well, it's funny because that was at the time it was a low budget movie. And
mhm.
today's low budget movies are much, much shorter. And that's one of the reasons why we no longer make those kind of movies, because in order to get your money back today, you've got to shoot an action movie like No Retreat, No Surrender in 7 or 9 days. And, we shot in 36 because we were really focused on the action, and action takes forever, to
Mhm.
get everything right. I remember having a discussion with Don Wilson back at the end of sort of the heyday of martial arts movies. And he was telling me that they had a take count, that they had 3 takes for every shot. And if they didn't get in 3 takes, they had to move on. And that flabbergasted me because, when we were making No Retreat, No Surrender, we'd go until we got the shot right. We
Mhm.
might have 50 takes of something. If it didn't look right, we had to
Wow.
keep going. And
Mhm.
so, that's sort of why we stopped making those movies, is because we couldn't do our style of action in 7 or 10 or 15 days. We needed, for American Shaolin, which was one of the last movies we made, we were in China for 6 months. I mean, we shot for, I think, 120 days, something like that. So it
Mhm.
was, our style of filmmaking didn't merge well with the new reality of having to sell these pictures for a lot less money.
Hmm. When the picture gets released, how's it received?
Oh, it got a theatrical release, which was,
Yes.
everybody was stunned by that. We got a small release that then rolled down into a bigger release,
Mhm.
and it really took off. I mean, people just loved it. They loved the American
Crowd pleaser.
story with the, yeah, it was a crowd pleaser. They loved it. I went to the premiere in LA with my wife, and nobody really knew what we had. There weren't that many people in the theater, and we thought, oh, this might just go straight to VHS or whatever.
Mhm.
But it took off. I mean, it got a nice a nice life in the theaters, and then when it came out on VHS, it just exploded.
Now, when do they tell you, Keith, write us the next script? Which, by the way, for those paying attention, is not originally called No Retreat, No Surrender 2. It's called Raging Thunder.
Raging Thunder. That's right.
Raging Thunder.
Yes. Well, they said write it straight away. As soon as we saw the premiere and we had a meeting after the premiere, they said, let's write the next one. And it was never meant to be a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
We did have contracts with Kurt McKinney and Jean-Claude Van Damme, so they were going to be in the movie, but it was not going to be a sequel.
Now, Van Damme does whatever Van Damme does, and he ends up going off to make Bloodsport, and probably was a part of his failed part of Predator. That's none of that's important. You said he's a pretty good dude at the time.
At the time, he was willing to do anything. He was a good guy.
Kurt McKinney, does he end up doing a soap opera after this?
Yes, he went to do Guiding Light. He was a long runner on the soap opera, a lot of money, a secure job. And I think that also there were a lot of things with the production of No Retreat, No Surrender 2 or Raging Thunder that, it was maybe a little bit dangerous in Thailand. At the time, there was a lot of violence going on. And so everybody was a little bit unsure of what to do. I wasn't involved in the picture after writing it. So I think that may have had an impact on Kurt, because we had got along very well during the making of No Retreat, No Surrender, and we're still friends today. I mean, Kurt's a great guy, but I think that he was kind of talked out of it by a lot of different things. And in the movie business, even though you have a contract with an actor, it's basically unenforceable, because you might force an actor to be in a movie, but then their performance is going to suffer because they don't want to be there. So there's no real benefit to enforcing this kind of a contract. So, Van Damme broke his contract, Kurt broke his contract, so we just replaced him. We replaced Kurt with Lauren Avedon, and we replaced Jean-Claude Van Damme with Matthias Hughes.
Oh, that's funny. Where do you find Matthias Hughes? Because this is his first picture.
Well, as
right?
I said, I think it was his first picture. He was kind of a strong man. I think he was originally from Germany. Great guy. I had never met him until I did an event in Germany, and we hit it off really well. He's really sort of a gentle giant. And I wasn't involved in the casting, although I did know Cynthia Rothrock at the time. And I was very pleased. I had sort of made an introduction to Cynthia to NG. And Cynthia is just the greatest woman there is, a legend in the martial arts. And it was great to have her in that movie. And I went out to the premiere of No Retreat, No Surrender 2 of Raging Thunder as well, and got to meet, got to hang out with Cynthia and hear some stories about the movie. But as I said, I wasn't involved in the production. After writing it, I was sort of cut out of everything. And when I saw the finished picture, it was very, very different from the script that I wrote.
Interesting.
And I went to NG and I said, look, I'd love to continue making movies with me, but if you're going to do it like we just did it, I'm out. I don't want to do it anymore. And NG said to me, I want you to be the guy. I want you to write. And then I said, then I want to produce too. And so I ended up writing and producing Blood Brothers, which was also called No Retreat, No Surrender 3. And then we went on to make 7 other movies together.
How long does it take you to write Raging Thunder?
I think it was about 5 or 6 months to write Raging Thunder. And I had written it as kind of similar to the original No Retreat, No Surrender. And then it was a kind of a coming of age story for what turned out to be Lauren Avedon's character. I had written him as this kind of naive guy that's a really good martial artist, but gets in over his head. And they changed, the guy that produced it changed that by hiring another writer and changed his character to being this kind of badass from the start. And, I like movies where the main character has a character arc where he changes over the course of the movie. And the way they had written it offered no change at all. Like he was a badass at the start and he was a badass at the end. And that's not, that wasn't interesting to me. And that's one of the reasons why I went to NG and I said, I won't do these kind of movies. I I'd love to work with you, but I want to write stories that mean something to me. Not that my movies are great or the scripts that I wrote were great. It's just I had a particular take on things that I wanted to see this kind of arc of character.
For this film, did you know going in that you were only going to be just writing, just on the writing team, or did you think like, of course I'm going to be there helping film, I'm going to be rolling the camera and giving direction, or was that a surprise? Like,
Yeah, it was a surprise. I thought I was going to be
okay,
like No Retreat, No Surrender. I was on the set as the second AD
okay,
for No Retreat, No Surrender, and I was the translator for the director who didn't speak any English. So Corey Yunkwe, he didn't speak any English, so I was translating for him, and I thought it was going to be the same sort of thing, and I was looking forward to that. And then I found out that I wasn't the guy that took over as producer, who was the sales agent for seasonal film, who didn't believe in No Retreat, No Surrender and undersold it. He ended up being the guy that was the producer of No Retreat, No Surrender 2. And
okay.
frankly, he didn't know anything about producing, didn't really know anything about writing. He was a salesman. So, we had a conflict there. And I was sort of cut out of the picture. And I think it was because he wanted to safeguard his relationship with NG. And, I was sort of pushed to the side.
Does NG at any point like take you aside, just like, hey, just sit this one out? I know you had expectations, but we're going to get you on the next one, I promise. Or just flatline the entire process?
Well, no, he said to me, he didn't promise me anything in the future. He said, we're going to do it this way. Enjoyed what you did on No Retreat, No Surrender, and let's see what happens.
Okay.
And then after this one, and I I can't repeat any of the stories that I heard because they weren't my firsthand stories, but I did hear there was a lot of conflict. There were a lot of problems. It wasn't a very, very smooth shoot, and in some places it was quite a dangerous shoot. So, I think he saw all of that and said, look, I'm going to go back to what really worked for us. Even though Raging Thunder was quite successful, he went back to sort of the formula we had for No Retreat, No Surrender, which was the original team working together.
You write a script called Raging Thunder. When do you find out it's now a sequel to No Retreat, No Surrender? And what is your reaction to that?
Well, it was the distributors that decided to rename it No Retreat, No Surrender to take advantage of the success of the original No Retreat, No Surrender. So at one point in my career, I thought every movie I made was going to be called No Retreat, No Surrender because that first one was so successful. So, it wasn't billed, even though it was called No Retreat, No Surrender, it wasn't billed as a sequel. It was just called that to raise sales. And that's what they did back then. If you remember, Bloodsport had Bloodsport 1, Bloodsport 2, Bloodsport 3. They did that with every successful movie because I think maybe they didn't think the audience was so smart and they thought, oh, well, you call it No Retreat, No Surrender, they'll just blindly go because they love the original.
I mean, in your professional opinion, do you think that's an actual factor? I mean, like when there's 4 American ninjas, they're all pretty much connected, but I mean, why not just name everything Avatar? Everything is Avengers Endgame, like.
Right.
I mean, does the movie make an extra penny because of No Retreat, No Surrender 2? Or like, would it have done just as well, maybe even better if it was just Raging Thunder?
Yeah, that's interesting to consider because when No Retreat, No Surrender was released here in Europe, it was called Karate Tiger. And they did the exact same thing with Raging Thunder. They called it Karate Tiger 2. And they did the same thing with King of the Kickboxers. When King of the Kickboxers came out and we did American Shaolin after that, they called American Shaolin King of the Kickboxers 2 in some countries. So it was really the distributors who decided that they would try to leverage the name to make more money.
I have to wonder, like, how much does that work?
Yeah.
I know I
don't think it would work today.
Maybe. I mean, who knows anymore? There's an entirely new franchise of Kickboxer that also stars Jean-Claude Van Damme, but it gets, my head starts to hurt and my nose bleeds when I think about it. I know you weren't in Thailand or on set for this, but at some point you have to hear a story where like they're not letting any prop guns on the we have to use real guns. We have to hope that like the army doesn't shoot anybody. Like, Does that word ever get back to you?
It got back to me afterwards. I heard
Afterwards.
stories about guns being fired on the set to control the actors and the crew, and
Oh, fuck.
that was just. I mean, I can't believe it happened, but I've heard a lot of stories about that.
Oh my god, that wasn't even what I was referring to. That's insane. There's a scene where Lauren Avedon has been arrested. They're about to put him on an airplane and deport him somewhere else. There are a dozen army guys surrounding him with M16 automatic rifles, and then he punches a guy and he steals a motorcycle, and not one of them, like 3 or 4 of them, actually got like just one bullet would have took him out. But reading that fact from IMDb, quote unquote fact, and then seeing it, I was like, oh, that's why they didn't shoot him, because they're really holding a live rifle there.
Real guns. Yeah.
Like,
Well,
Lauren Avedon has to be
one of the
a little bit
things
scared during that, right?
I can imagine. I mean, this was his first movie, so he didn't know that much at that time. Now he's a very experienced martial arts actor. But one of the things with martial arts movies is what you raise a very good point. Once you introduce guns into a martial arts movie, it doesn't make sense anymore. If somebody's got a gun and then for some reason you're fighting, it's like Bruce Lee's famous quote from Enter the Dragon: "Any bloody fool can pull the trigger." So it's I think that we really had to be careful about putting guns into the martial arts movies, because the audience just can't accept it. If there's a gun there, why not just shoot him? Why let him run off, or why let him fight you? If you have a gun, you can just kill him.
King of the Kickboxers is the next film that you work on, or is there its brother in arms?
No, then it was Blood Brothers was the next one with
Brothers.
Lauren and Keith Vitale. So that we made in Tampa, Florida, in Tampa and its environs, and that became known as No Retreat, No Surrender 3, Blood Brothers. So at least I got the original name into the title.
And is it the same situation? The picture's a hit in the theater is go, go, go. Get us this next one.
No, Raging Thunder didn't get much of a theatrical release, but it did quite well, because the fighting is really spectacular.
Some good stuff in it,
Raging Thunder. Yeah, some really good stuff with Cynthia in there, and Lauren is a beautiful fighter on screen. And we had a lot of great stuntmen, so it was really I think the fighting in it was really good. There are a couple of really great scenes, so that I think caught on with audiences. It got some theatrical releases in other parts of the world. It did not get a theatrical release in the US. I think we did have a premiere. We had a premiere in the theater, but then it went straight to video. And so the next one, after Raging Thunder came out, NG came back to me and said, let's do another picture. Do you have any ideas? And we brainstormed some ideas, and then we did a movie that was shot in Florida, featuring Lauren Avedon and Keith Vitale as brothers.
I want to ask one more question about No Retreat, No Surrender. Again, you're not anywhere in production. You write the script and then you're off to do other stuff. How much different from your writing is Cynthia Rothrock's death scene? Because it's the best scene in the movie, actually. Like when she does pass away, like I am legitimately bummed at the end of it. And I've never seen her do anything before that or since then. Like, how much of that was your work? How much of that is like I just went with it? What do you know about that, if you may?
Frankly, I don't know. I'm not very clear on that. I know that in the original script she was to die, but I don't remember the scene very clearly. So she's really talented. She's a great fighter, and she's just a great person. So I think a lot of that might have been just Cynthia's raw talent coming out in that scene.
It's well done. It's well done. You end up doing it. What's watchversedie.com 2001?
It's Watch Us Die.
Watch Us Die. Excuse me, my chicken scratch.
Right. That was at the very beginning of sort of the internet world, and so we wanted to try a thriller. So it wasn't an action movie; it was a thriller, and I thought it was an interesting story. It was fun to make. We made it in an old mansion. Because of the nature of low budget movies at the time. We designed it to be made in one location. So we made it for a very low amount of money. And, it was an interesting premise that we had just started these sites had just started where you could watch people live in a house. And so I came up with the idea of doing a movie about, somebody that starts to kill people in that house to get more viewers and to get more people to sign on and watch.
Is it all from the point of view of web cameras and surveillance video?
Yeah, it's a mixture of like live footage, people watching from their homes and their reaction, and then some footage from the cameras.
Okay, that sounds fresh, man. There's a film festival happening this weekend called the Unnamed Footage Festival, and they've shown stuff like the Blair Witch Project, and I want to say one of the Paranormal Activities, but it's 4 days of just found footage films.
Oh, wow.
I've always thought it was a fantastic genre, or just a fascinating genre. A lot of it's hit or miss, but it's just like, this is all hard to like, not only just produce, but then edit. And
there's so much footage.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to see where I can get a copy of this. It's directed by Ryan Wu.
Yeah,
2001. All right, dig that. You're trying to get No Retreat, No Surrender. You're trying to make it a remake, a reboot, something with the name on it this time, for real. Is it harder to find backing for it, the traditional system? Like, would it be easier going crowdfunding? Do you think there's an audience there for that? Or,
well, we've had a lot of really good interest because if you're in the martial arts, No Retreat, No Surrender.
True.
So a lot of guys that are at the heads of companies now are older guys, of course, because they're heads of companies. So they know No Retreat, No Surrender, and they know that it was really successful. So we're getting meetings with people because they know about No Retreat, No Surrender. Now, whether or not the story will captivate those guys is another question. And that's what we're working on now, is the pitch deck for this. And we're having some meetings, and there's been a lot of interest, but to pull the trigger on something, it takes a while for people to do some research and see if this kind of a story will resonate with today's audience. I mean, Cobra Kai, which is kind of a reboot of the Karate Kid, has done very well. And so it's something that could work. We'll have to see if we have a chance.
If you can, just hip knee reaction, just shoot. A lot can happen between now and the Go picture, but who would you like to have star in this?
Oh, well, I've talked to Kurt McKinney about reprising his role as Jason Stillwell. And I've approached Scott Adkins, who's a big fan of No Retreat, No Surrender, and he has expressed interest being in it. And I think Scott's probably the best martial arts fighter out there right now, along with Michael Jai White. So I think he and Scott Adkins are two of the best on-screen fighters right now. So 100%. We'd love to have both of them in Ring of Truth.
That would be a sweet picture.
It would.
Yeah. Keith Strandberg, is there anything else you want to talk about tonight, man? I think I got everything here on my notes.
Well, no, I appreciate you taking the time, and I love talking about the old days. I love our conversation. It was really a fantastic part of my life. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
You're a fascinating dude, man. I hope we can talk more. Folks, check out the Kick-Ass Movie Podcast episode. It's a bonus episode, so it's not hard to find. But otherwise, yep, we talked about No Retreat, No Surrender tonight. The Kick-Ass Movie Podcast episode of it comes out March 29th. That's me. And the director of Pact of Vengeance, Master Len Kabaczynski. We're going to break down all the good, all the bad, everything in between. It's a lot of fun. Otherwise, check out the Waffle Box podcast every Wednesday. It's the best part of Wednesdays. Friend of the family, Mike Fish. We talk about everything and nothing all at the same time. Otherwise, for Keith Strandberg, I've been Kush Hayes. You've been you.
Microdose, 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 yeah, microdose.
From the BosNet Family,
What's watchversedie.com 2001?
It's Watch Us Die.